There we are. We're ready to rock and roll. How you doing, Matt? How you feeling, baby?
I am good. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Was there any truth that the Colts called you first before Jeff Saturday?
It should have. Listen. I would have gone against analytics, and I've never coached in college or pros either. And I didn't play. I also didn't play for 13 years.
Yeah, but you didn't coach high school like Jeff Saturday. Ha! He's got that shit on you.
I coached high school hockey. Does that count for anything?
Right. That's more physical. All right.
Yeah, it's something. It's a contact sport.
I'll go with that. My problem with that, I can joke around with that shit. And then there's John Lynch and Steve Kerr to stick in my face. And yeah, I could talk about Matt Millen and Steve Nash.
Sure.
you know,
it goes on and on.
And that's the problem with this shit.
Yeah.
Actually, it's actually worked a couple times and it's failed several others, by the way. Magic Johnson, we can, there's all kinds of Dan Marino did it for like an hour.
Elgin Baylor.
I was at the Senior Bowl the year that they Dan is going to go in as a GM. Brother, he was there for like 12 hours in one day and said, "Yeah, no, dude, no, I'm out of here. This is real work. I'm retired, bro. Yeah. I need to go get the back 9 in the afternoon." You know what I'm saying? So now he's in a perfect role of walks in anytime he wants, consults, this, that, face of, go show up and shake hands with sponsors and all that kind of stuff. That's perfect for Dan. Dan didn't want the grind of a general manager who has no effing life and you're not going to see your family. That it has failed so many times. Well, so is this one going to succeed, Matt?
No. I because also like all those people you just mentioned, they're all GMs. He's the head coach.
Yeah.
Like I mean, this is Steve Nash was the head coach. But I mean, this is also the NFL. This literally hasn't happened since Norm Van Brocklin in 1961. And by the way, Norm Van Brocklin was a terrible head coach. And that was 60 years ago when it was a hell of a lot easier to be a head coach. And you could smoke on the sideline and just tell somebody, hey, get out there and hit him. Okay. I mean, that was pretty much the extent of being a coach for most of these teams in the 60s. I think the bigger story is if you're on that Colts staff and you get this news, you're thinking to yourself, why am I here? I mean, I can't get the interim. I can't get a shot at that. Or even if I can't, somebody I've worked alongside for years can't get that chance. So now we all have a boss who's going to come in here and has absolutely no credibility as a coach. Yes, he was a good player. But if Irsay wants to go the route of, well, I want to bring in a former player and a legend, you have Reggie Wayne on your staff. He's already there. Why wouldn't you bring in Reggie Wayne? Why wouldn't you bring in Cato June, who was a very good player for a long time in Indianapolis, who's on your staff? Like, to me, it's an insult to everybody in that room. And I don't know what you do Sunday. Who's calling the plays? Obviously, now they've announced it's going to be a 30-year-old who was basically a quality control coach who's going to come in there now and just do this. You have a head coach who's never been a coach at a meaningful level. You have essentially what is now an offensive coordinator who's never been a coordinator anywhere. And you have a quarterback who was ridiculously overwhelmed last week, making his 3rd career start. Good luck. That is a recipe to not win a game the rest of the year.
You mean Sam Ehlinger doesn't lift your sails and just make you feel like
he didn't do it in college? The world? He was a good college. I mean, it's so bad. Although I got to tell you, I got to say it. Like, I was thinking about this matchup, Colts and the Raiders. I'm probably going to write about it at some point this week. Like, this is now you have Jeff Saturday and all that comes with the situation, which we've talked about, going against the Raiders and Josh McDaniels, who set all this in motion years ago when he flipped off essentially the entire Colts organization at the altar. And what happened? Well, so they had to scramble. They hired Frank Wright, and everything's history since. And Chris Ballard ripped into McDaniels during that presser, that crazy day when he didn't show up, essentially. So who's Saturday going against? Josh McDaniels, who's blown 3 17-point leads this year. I almost, just for the comedy of it, would love to see what happens if the Colts win. Like, just for the sheer hilarity of all that would happen in the NFL world. But the Raiders, it's one of those games you better win. You better win this game.
So I'm just thinking about this now while you're talking about all of this.
Yep.
So what's dumber in your world here? The Colts bringing in Jeff Saturday, but look who's doing it, Jim Irsay. Okay, so not necessarily both oars are in the water. The Raiders hiring Josh McDaniel after the debacle, after watching every apple that falls from that Belichick tree is rotten. You still go and hire McDaniels, and now we see the results. Or after all those titles as a defensive coordinator and as a head coach, Bill Belichick goes into the season with no offensive coordinator and has like this makeshift offensive coordinator stuff, which, by the way, kind of reminds me of what Flo was trying to do here in Miami in a way. So which one makes the least amount of sense to Matt Verderame?
I mean, it's quite a race. I would say the Jeff Saturday thing. Like I was texting people in the league right after that was announced. And I had one person in the league say to me, it's the most surprising hire they've seen in their 30 plus years in the NFL. I had another person say to me, the only reason they did this is to tank because they need a quarterback.
Right.
And then, and there were some other people who had differing opinions. So one person actually was like, hey, good for Jeff. He's a good guy. I'll see how it works out. But the vast majority of it was, what? I mean, that was pretty much the overwhelming thought coming out of the NFL. I would say, though, like the Josh McDaniels thing, look, and I can honestly state, I said this way before the season started. That hire never made any sense to me. Never.
Me neither.
He's never been good unless he's had Tom Brady. Ever. Anywhere he's been. Like, he was a terrible head coach in Denver. He was an awful coordinator with the Rams in St. Louis for a year. When he didn't have Brady in New England, they were all right. They were nothing special. And let's face it, anytime you're in New England, Belichick runs everything that goes on anyway. So you go to the Raiders, and everybody's acting like this is some home run hire. Why? He's never done anything, ever, anywhere he's been. So, and now they're 2-6, and he's supposedly this offensive guru, and they stink. They can't score. They blow leads like crazy. So I would say those two are worse. Belichick, at least, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, I didn't understand it, but he's Belichick, so you're like, well, maybe. And to their credit, with no quarterback, they're 5-4. So, I always try to just give Belichick hey, he's Bill Belichick. But the other two teams, I'll never understand it.
Right. But, I mean, I would figure him to make smart decisions, not Mark Davis or Jim Irsay. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of – and, by the way, Seattle, I thought they were going to tank because I got to admit, you're starting Geno Smith. You'll win one game this year. And, boy, was I wrong. And God bless Geno Smith because he's a Miami guy. And I gave up on that guy years ago. I mean, like the second he came out of Florida State, I gave up on him pretty much. And God bless him, bro. He has turned himself into a decent quarterback. And for him, he's had a hell of a year. For him, hell of a year. Wow.
He to me, is the comeback player of the year.
Yes.
I don't think there's any question. I would even argue, I mean, he's not the MVP of the league. I've started to see people like, is he the MVP? No, he's not the MVP. But is he in the top 10? I mean, maybe. Like, he's had a really good year. He really has. I think, the two teams, in a weird way, that I think people like don't believe in the quarterback, even though that all the evidence is pointing that you should believe in the quarterback, Seattle and Miami. Like, there's this weird, like, well, Tua underthrows the deep ball. Okay. I mean, yeah, sometimes, but he's having a great year. Like, at some point
he underthrows Tyreek. He doesn't underthrow Waddle, which tells me that he's still kind of that timing shit with him, that it's still not there. Although, as one Dolphin fan that was kind of smart, and you should know this because you're a KC guy, he said there were many times, and he showed it. He threw me like 6 in a row of Mahomes underthrowing Tyreek too, because I guess sometimes with that freak, that gear, you may go late. Now Mahomes has a better arm, so it's going to happen a lot less to him. But if it can even happen to Mahomes, obviously it's going to happen to Tua.
I was just about to say, I mean, it happened. It absolutely happened occasionally. I mean, if you go look at the most famous connection those two ever had, Wasp in the Super Bowl in Miami.
Right.
I mean, I was at that game. I was in the press box. I mean, that ball, Tyreek Hill basically caught like a punt. I
Right.
mean, and the part of that was DeForest Buckner was in the process of trying to kill Mahomes. But still, the point remains like, listen, I think those are the two teams right now in the league that people are like, well, you know, it's like always a moving of the goalposts with these things. Listen, I don't understand why the Seahawks are an underdog against Tampa this week. Why? They're better than them. They've outplayed them all year long. Brady's not been as good as anybody would have thought he would have been this year. He's struggled. Their offense has been hideous. Miami's a 4-point favorite against Cleveland. Why is Miami a 4-point favorite against Cleveland? Miami is at home against the Browns. They're significantly better than the Browns. They should win that game going.
Oh, I'm laying them. It actually went down to 3.5. I took it this morning at 3.5.
It's insane. Like, well, now look, I understand that Miami's defense, like, there's like some concern there, maybe. But I mean, it's not like Cleveland's going to go out there and score a million points in this game. I mean, if Cleveland wins, it's going to be
they don't.
It's going to be because Cleveland runs the ball like crazy, and it's just one of those, like, you know, everybody instead of getting 12 possessions gets 8, and there's a turnover, there's a missed field goal, something like that. I mean, it's not going to be because Cleveland goes out and scores 42 points.
No.
So, I think those are the two quarterbacks, and for whatever reason, there's like this hesitancy to admit, and to me, like, I've watched Tua every snap of the year. Like, he's played really well. He's been really good. And and you get these people who are like, well, his life's made easier. Yeah, well, I mean, look around the league. Allen's got great receivers. Mahomes has great weapons. Hurts has great weapons. Burrow has great. Like, that's part of it. That's part of being a really good player. That's literally the point. I mean, as you can see over my shoulder, I'm a New Jersey Devils fan. Marty Brodeur was a great goaltender for 20 years. Well, guess what? He had 2 Hall of Fame defensemen in front of him. Like, that's part of it. It's part of sports. It's who's around you. So I think those two teams deserve more credit than they're getting nationally.
Of course, man. No, I'm with you there. In fact, I've been talking about this the last couple of days. They should beat Cleveland. They should beat Houston after the bye week. But then you've got at Bills, against
Niners
Green Bay, at Chargers, and at San Fran.
Yes.
If Miami and Tua win 3 of those 4 or all 4, Tua gets in the MVP conversation, I think. But Omar Kelly had a great one this morning, and he said because so many people buried Tua, it's going to be hard for their egos to have that incredibly pendulum swing of, oh, he can't play, he's got no arm, and now I got to vote for him for MVP. Wow, So there'll be a lot of people that will stay away from that vote because it would make them incredibly wrong. So I think Omar Kelly's got a really good point on that one.
There's probably some truth in that. I mean, like, you know what? You're right about, the Dolphins. These next 2 games, to me, if you're Miami, you got to win these games. I mean, these are games where, Cleveland's decent, but they're not a team Miami should lose to, and then they should kill Houston. And then you have, as you mentioned, they have a 3-game stretch to start December that is going to be really defining in a lot of ways. You have at the Chargers, at the Niners, at the Bills. To me, in a weird, that's one of those trips that if you win one of them, okay, not a disaster. If you win 2 of them, that's great. And if you win all 3 of them, that's unbelievable. I mean, if you win all 3 of them, you got to be considered a legitimate, hey, this team should be in the Super Bowl conversation.
Yeah.
Hell, I'd even argue 2 of them should be in the Super Bowl conversation. So,
well, by the way, you talk about moving goalposts. What was the entire offseason? Oh, no, they're starting off with the Patriots, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Bengals. And they went 3-1, and they didn't go 4-0 because Tua got injured in that Bengals game, because I'm convinced if Tua's in that game, they win that game too.
Very well could have. Very well could have.
So it's funny how they, moving the goalpost, that was, let's see if the Dolphins are for real. And,
I mean, to me at this point, I remember we talked about it before the season started. And we're like, if they go 2-2, that's great. Well, they went 3-1, and like you said, very well. Who knows? Could have won the Cincinnati game. To me, at this point, Miami's clearly, other than Kansas City and Buffalo, the best team. And I'll even go a step further with this. I really think that if Miami gets into a playoff game, plays Buffalo or Kansas City, they have a shot to win the game. Like, I don't think there's like this, oh my God, there's no way. Now, look. I do believe there's something to, not just for Miami, for any team, there's something to the idea of, like, those 2 teams have been there in the playoffs. They've been there for years. Like, There's an experience factor. There is.
Of course.
That being said, Hill's got plenty of experience, and Tua won a national championship. So it's not like he's never been to a big game in his life. I mean, they've been right,
Super
exactly,
Bowl
sure,
winner.
another guy. So I mean, they have that experience. I will say I'm interested to see when they go to Buffalo in the regular season. I actually think in a weird way it benefits Miami. It's a late season game, so you're going to get bad weather, or at least it's going to be cold. You would think, unless you get some unseasonably warm weather in Buffalo. But my point is, I think that helps Miami in this regard. You're going to get a feel in the regular season for what the playoff weather might be like. If you've got to go to Buffalo, if you've got to go to Kansas City, the playoff game, and it's 10 degrees, at least you've done it in the regular season. Whereas if you played Buffalo on the road in September and you don't have another game like that, then it's like, well, what the coldest game we've played all year is 70 degrees, and now we got to go down there and play some game where we're totally out of the element that we're normally in. I think it's going to be really interesting. I really do. I do not think Miami is the one team in the AFC, maybe Cincinnati too, you want to throw them in there, that can score with Buffalo and Kansas City. I don't think Baltimore can. I don't think the Chargers can. Miami can score with them. Like Miami can get into a game where they win 35-31. I think that's how you have to beat one of those two teams.
Yeah. And not for nothing, but I don't think those moments will be big for Tua either. Where other young quarterbacks, you might worry about it. That dude's wired differently, bro. That dude won more than he lost around Brian Flores, who hated him and didn't want him there. I mean, he is a mentally tough dude. And to come back from all those injuries, brother, I'd have trouble going back to work after that hip injury that he had.
No
He's
doubt.
Playing NFL football. That's the one thing I do like about it. I don't think any moment will be too big for him where you normally would worry about that first playoff run for young quarterbacks. That's just me.
No, I'm with you because, like I said earlier, I mean, he won a national championship, and I don't know if people are familiar. I mean, obviously, you guys down in Florida, like Alabama, there's no bigger pressure than playing for the University of Alabama. I mean, and when you're supposed to win and you're supposed to dominate, and for him to come in off the bench and win him a national championship and be brilliant in the game, it wasn't like he came in and was some passenger. I mean, he was fantastic in the game.
Yep.
I agree with you. I don't think the moment's going to be too big. McDaniel's been to a million playoff games as an assistant coach. Look, if there's any concern, I think every Dolphins fan here knows it's going to be the defense. I mean, is it just going to be one of these things?
Secondary, bro. Secondary.
Yeah, they're just so beat up. Is it just one of these things where Kansas City or Buffalo, if you get into a playoff game, they just hang 45 on them, and that's it? But of all the teams in the conference that I think if you look at Buffalo and Kansas City, so who could beat them? I think it's Miami or Cincinnati because you could get into a game where one of those teams could just go off, and it could just be, hey, who's going to have the ball last? Who's going to, I mean, I think, look, and the other thing is too right now, let's face it, we're going to find out a little bit more today. I've been trying to find this out for 2 days. Just cannot do it. What's going on with Josh Allen?
Well, you gave me the segue.
Yeah.
We just had Ian Rappaport on, and he told us what he's hearing. It's a slight partial tear.
Okay.
So it's going to depend on how he handles it, how he can handle it, and how they can manage it throughout the year. The only part that I don't know, and we need to get a doctor on, is if you have a partial tear,
correct,
then that tells me you probably shouldn't play him for a couple weeks and try to heal that partial tear up. But if he goes out there, it's a UCL. Any of us that have followed baseball,
sure,
we know you will not be able to continue with that shit. Eventually, it's going to give. And by the way, you talked about that weather.
Yeah.
And cold weather,
that's not
what you want to deal with, bro.
It's a real, I mean, like I said, I've been trying to nail this down. And listen, I've talked to enough people that you have an idea of what's going on, but it's one of those things like you can't report if you're not 100% because it's somebody's health. And if you're wrong by any chance, then you're an a-hole, right? So I'm not going to go that route. I'd say this, like if Ian's correct, and Ian obviously is beyond reproach.
It's a slight tear. It's a small tear, he says.
Okay. I mean, that's what it ends up being. Like, I am not a doctor. I wish my wife was here. She actually has her doctor. You can ask her. But you know what? It's one of those things where if he needs a couple weeks to heal, right? If that's what it ends up being, I think you're crazy if you're Buffalo if you don't sit him down. I mean, you cannot. If there's, let's put it this way, if he can play and there's no worse chance he's going to injure it further, then okay,
Right.
fine. And then it becomes a pain tolerance thing, okay, that's one deal. If it's a thing where, hey, look, if he sits for 2 or 3 weeks and he'll heal 100%, or he's going to go out there and play and he might be able to play, but he could re-injure it, and if he injures it, he's out for the season, I think you have to sit him. I think you have to sit him down, because if you're Buffalo, even if it means losing home field advantage, even if it means losing the division, you'd rather go into the playoffs with a healthy Josh Allen and be a 5 seed or a 3 seed or whatever it is, than go in there and you've got Case Keenum, because you're not going anywhere. So
Right.
I think there's a mix. And the other thing, look, football and baseball are different sports, but obviously we know baseball, torn ACL or UCL, that means Tommy John, all that stuff. Well, football, I wonder, guys who hurt their UCL in baseball, even guys who don't always need Tommy John, their velocity comes down significantly, because obviously everything was, you're throwing motion, UCL, all of it. Can he throw the ball as hard? Can he throw, or is it one of these things where some throws he will, some he won't? I mean, we saw 2 throws after he hurt himself on Sunday. One was 75 yards down the field, one of the best throws you'll ever see. The other one was skipped into Stephon Diggs 10 yards down the field, 20 yards down the field. I'm very interested to see. I mean, McDermott is going to speak here in a matter of about an hour or so. So it'd be very interesting to see what he has to say.
And here's the catch-22. Because I think of those UCL tears, usually you got to be careful with that, because then it becomes a complete tear and he's done.
It could, yeah,
so
sure.
Here's what you got to say. All right, guys, either we shit the bed for this year and we put him on ice and we get him healthy for next year. But if we play him and he risks and he injures in the next month, then he's going to have an injury that's going to go into next season.
Sure.
And so this season's ruined and next season's ruined, because we won't have him for the first 12 games. And that means we won't be in playoff contention at that point by the time we do get him back. And so I think that's the fine line you got to walk with Buffalo. Again, I don't know. Ian says it's a slight tear, but can that tear become something bigger? Because most pitchers, from my experience of covering baseball and watching it for years, brother, once you get a partial tear in your UCL, you're done pretty much. You're pretty much done. Either they shelve you until they can get you back healthy again, or they go and have the surgery and you're done already. One of those things. But it's rarely they let you go back out there with a slight tear, because it really creates a real problem.
I'm just a fan of baseball. I don't cover professional, obviously, but if I remember right, didn't somebody on the Rays partially tear it, and then they eventually needed Tommy John last year?
Yeah.
So I mean, look, you know what? Either way, if we're going to find out here soon enough. If I'm the Bills, by the way, I was looking down at my phone here for a quick second, because I wanted to look up the line of the game. That line, the early line, was 9.5. Then it was like 6.5, 7, depending on the book. It is now 3.5, which is telling you Vegas thinks he is not going to play in this game. You know what? Look, I think the question is going to be, I mean, I don't know anything yet. Nobody does totally, because the Bills haven't said anything, and nobody's come out and been 100% on it. But if he misses time, how much time does he miss? I mean, the Bills schedule the next couple of weeks. They play the Vikings this weekend at home, and then they have the Browns, and then they have the Lions on Thanksgiving. Those are the next 3 games. Now, you would think with Case Keenum they can beat the Lions. I would think they beat Cleveland. I don't know if they beat Minnesota. So, we'll see. The one thing that scares you if you're a Bills fan, beyond just obviously his health, they are so incredibly reliant on Allen to do everything. I mean, to run the ball, to move the sticks. Like Sunday Night Football, watching Mahomes, I actually thought to myself, he had 509 yards in the game. I thought to myself, like, this is what the Bills have to do every week. I mean, Mahomes had to run for 60-some-odd yards in the game, throw for 400 and so. Like, that's literally what that's every Bills game. He's got to just take off running 10 times a game, and it's fine, and it's fun, and it's a magic show when it's working. And then, now, and this, to be fair, he got hurt in the pocket.
Right.
But every time you get hit, you take a risk. We've talked about it with Tua.
I'm not a fan of it. If I was a Bills fan, I'd be pissed that they let him run too much. But then again, I think it's a Tua thing. Although lately, the last 2 weeks, Tua has either been throwing the ball away or sliding, which I've
Get
been really
down.
proud of him.
Get down.
Yeah, he's been doing it, which is kind of crazy. But his normal thing is just play the game, and that's the problem with Josh. Joe Burrow has that same mentality too. Just play the game, and if you have to run and you have to take a hit, so be it. It's just one of those things. I personally, if I was a Bills fan, I would hate it. I think it's irresponsible of them to allow him to run that much. I'd want my quarter like Justin Fields. God bless you, dude. You put on a show for us
He
on
did.
Sunday.
He did. He was
But you
impressive.
cannot live like that because eventually, bro, they're going to catch up to you. You got to beat people from the pocket.
That's one thing I give Lamar Jackson a lot of credit for is he runs a lot, but he doesn't take big hits. He gets down, gets out of bounds, right? He's smart about it. He very rarely, I mean, the one time he got hurt, it was actually, again, not in the pocket, but he was trying to pass. He was trying to scramble away from a guy. Happens. I always believe if you're the quarterback, look, man, just get down. Like now, look, if it's a playoff game and you gotta hey, that's one thing. You're fine. You lower your shoulder, you do what you gotta do. It's third and it's a critical situation, fine. These guys on like 2nd and 9 in the second quarter or some game. Bro, just take 3rd and 2. It's fine. Like, and everybody on the team would say the same thing. Get that. We'll pick up the 2 yards. But that is one criticism. I think the Bills have done an amazing job building that team. But if I have one criticism of them, how many years is it going to take for you to build a semblance of a run game? I mean, it shouldn't be that every time they need 3 yards on the ground, Allen's got to run a quarterback sweep.
Right.
I mean, and by the way, Devin Singletary's a decent back. He's not Walter Payton, but like he can't pick up 2 yards. You can't hand off and block for 2 yards. You're never going to be a team that is going to be a power run team. I get it. I mean, neither is Kansas City. But if the Chiefs typically have to line up and run for 2 yards, they can do it. Like Buffalo, it's like, well, they've got to just let Allen pick up every yard they get. And so if he's out, you do wonder, like, can they function offensively? Can they function at all? Unfortunately, might have to find out here.
Yeah, that's would be. I think they're going to struggle big time without Josh. That's exactly what you said. They rely on him to do so damn much. Frank Reich, what do you? I almost get the feeling that he picked the quarterbacks, and that's why he's not there, and Ballard is still there. Rappaport talked about that Ballard and the owner have a really good relationship.
Yep.
But they're like I made the example of, look, McDaniel's here, right? Why did they trade for Jeff Wilson? Why did they bring River Craycraft?
Right.
Why did they bring Mostert here? Why did they bring Sherfield here? Oh, I'm sorry. He coached all those guys.
Yes.
And so there's familiarity. And I would imagine that Frank Reich, the QB guy, I'm sure Ballard wasn't telling him, you got to get this quarterback. I'm sure Frank said, that guy fits my system. Let's go get him. And I almost get that feeling that that's what cost him the job, the failure of the last 2 quarterbacks. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Carson Wentz was definitely a Frank Reich guy. I mean, Frank Reich, I absolutely, I understand, went to the table for him. And I remember he even talked about that, I believe, at the Combine last year. It was my guy, and I wanted him, and that didn't work. And Jim Irsay, at the end of last season, was livid when they lost to Jacksonville at the end of the season. Was also very uncomfortable with Wentz and his choice not to get vaccinated, which cost him time. And so there was, in Irsay is a very big pro-vaccine guy. So there was a lot of stuff with Irsay and Wentz that did not jive. Then they lose to Jacksonville. Wentz is out the door. They basically fall into Matt Ryan because they were going to move on. In fact, they did move on from Wentz even before they knew they could get Matt Ryan. They were prepared to move on and go with Sam Ehlinger. They get Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is a disaster. So now you have Sam Ehlinger. Ehlinger looks like he is light years away from being ready to be an NFL starting quarterback. And so you look at it and go, I think Irsay said, all right, we got to make a change. The easiest change in the world to make is the head coach. We'll move on from him. Ironically, it's funny. I actually wrote Monday morning in Stacking the Box. I wrote that I think it's time for Irsay to look at Frank Reich's job. Well, 4 hours later, he was fired. So, a shameless plug. Read Stacking the Box. But I wonder if Ballard gets the rest of this year and then is also removed. Although Ian is correct, they do have a very good relationship. So maybe Ballard finds a way to survive that. You never know with the Colts because the ownership is so unpredictable. I mean, and I think sometimes people hear that from reporters and they say, well, that's just an out. It's the truth. Like some of these owners are just, you never know what's going to happen. I'll tell you right now, there wasn't a person in the world who thought Jeff Saturday was going to be the head coach. Okay. You don't know what Jim Irsay is going to do. I think Frank Reich, you're correct. Quarterback decisions, it ended up throwing him out of the building after a handful of years. But I will say, I think Ballard deserves some blame in this too. You've had 5 years now, 4 years, 5 years to fix this. Get a quarterback, draft one. I mean, they don't seem interested in like actually investing in a quarterback. Well, they're going to have to now, but it's cost Frank Reich his job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've had their fortunes with the drafting. So I guess now they wanted to try to, cut some corners and go and get a guy. All right. Tell them about Stacking the Box article, podcast, and all.
Yeah. Monday morning, the column goes up at Fanside. I also tweet it out every week, so you can see it there. I've got the NFL quarterback rankings out there. Which, by the way, if you're a Dolphins fan, and I'm going to tweet that out right after I get off the show, you should check that out. Tua made a big move up, so had a very good week there. And then the podcast on Tuesdays, it goes up at 11 o'clock, noon Eastern, 11 Central every week on YouTube. Also have the Sunday pregame show. What was it, a week ago on the trade deadline? We broke the news to Raheem Mostert. They made trades. He found out live on Stack the Box. So please make sure to check it out. Subscribe right after you're done watching Big O here. And hopefully see you in the chat.
Appreciate you as always, Matt. We will catch up next week, my friend. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Take care.
You got it. We step out of the huddle with Matt Verderame.